This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, across markets, investors eyed continuing rises in coronavirus infections in a number of large markets. Also, investors digested U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's comments today that rates may need to rise to stop the U.S. economy from overheating. Well, technology shares slipped the most, with tech-heavy Nasdaq having its worst day since March. MSCI's index of emerging market stocks fell for the fourth consecutive session. But unlike its peers, South Africa's JSE All-Share was up almost 2%. We saw all major indices closing in the green. Financials and resources both climbed over 2% on the day. Now, also coming up on today's show, the challenge of translating positive economic numbers to positive lives in Zimbabwe, the connection between South Africa's devastating drought of 2015 and climate change, and Ethiopia's latest graduates tasked to drive the Ethiopia-Djibouti railway trains. Well, let's kick off today's show in Zimbabwe. The government recently revised its GDP upwards to $24 billion, attributing it to sound financial policies. However, citizens in the country are yet to feel the benefits of an expanding economy. Analysts actually say the government must commit to implementing its own policies first. Well, let's get more on that from CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya.
A bumper harvest, increased industrial capacity utilization owing to stronger demand for local products under COVID-19 restrictions, falling inflation, and a stable currency have been the bedfellows of Zimbabwe's recent economic resurgence.
If you look at some of the crucial indicators in the economy, they seem to be coming right. These indicators have to be watched. There's no doubt about it that there is pressure in the economy, particularly from wage pressures coming through from the civil servants and from ordinary citizens.
Finance Minister Professor Mthuli Ncube says the country is now a $24 billion economy and expects 7.4% growth this year. The numbers, which make good reading on paper, may not translate to the lived reality.
The gap between the rich and poor is actually wider. A lot of people are earning below the poverty datum line, or they're earning amounts which are less, like possibly much less, 80% less than the USD comparatives when we did have the multi-currency. So if it's not flowing to the people, then it's just government that's playing up statistics at the moment.
Some observers say the full impact of the gains will be felt later. To sustain the positive trajectory, authorities have been urged to expedite policies that will increase production in two key sectors of the economy. These are agriculture and mining. One will substitute food imports and the other will generate foreign currency. Government also needs to maintain its fiscal discipline.
Government needs to not borrow, particularly from the unsupervised central bank overdraft. Government needs to also get its debts under control and make sure, to coin a well-used frame, live within its means.
The Southern African nation is anticipating a rebound from the COVID-19 crisis as it rolls out an accelerated mass vaccination program. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now, South Africa's economy is expected to recover between 3 and 4% this year. That's after the COVID-induced contraction in 2020. Now, the country's vaccine rollout has, however, been marred by setbacks, threatening the progress to kickstart the economy after last year's slump. News of the resumption of the COVID-19 vaccination program has certainly helped. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with the details.
The country's main stock market, the JSE, has been resilient throughout the pandemic lockdowns, but it's not a proxy for the country's economy.
The JSE, we're now in May, it's just come off of 6 months of gains. So for each month preceding, it's been green. April was only up 0.7%, so you can see the momentum we had last year is slowing down now. But that, as you say, it's not a proxy for South Africa. Mining shares, agricultural shares, more international focused companies have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
But some local sectors are getting organised. The South African tourism sector, one of the key job creators and contributors to the country's economy, has developed a sector recovery plan.
I think this is a good start. The fact that we have a plan that's approved by Cabinet, it shows that there is intent, from government side, to do more than what has been done in the past. So this is a good start. And I must say that we participated in the formulation of this plan, and I do think that the fact that it's approved, it means that the resources can now be directed into the recovery of the sector.
However, listed hospitality and tourism companies are still languishing.
First one that comes to mind is something like Bidcorp. They're a food company. They supply a lot of the restaurants, hotels. They've been very, very range bound. They actually had to write down hundreds of millions of rands worth of stock when lockdown happened because food doesn't last forever. So that's still been fairly range bound, but you would expect it as tourism picks up, their numbers will pick up, restaurants will pick up, and their share price should pick up.
International tourism remains almost non-existent. The United States has effectively banned its nationals from visiting South Africa, but the tourism sector believes it can entice visitors to the country because its frontline workers are about to be vaccinated.
Now, the most important thing is that we want the touch points of tourism to be vaccinated so that we can then open up to the world. Those countries like the USA and many other UK that are saying that people should not come to South Africa, we can then say to them, our touch points are vaccinated. In fact, even now as I speak, our numbers are so low that I don't even understand why there's a restriction on people traveling to South Africa.
While tourism is important to South Africa, the economy is made up of several sectors that contribute to the country's GDP.
Our banks have found a lot lower write-downs than they were expecting, so there is, what they call it, green shoots. There is a silver lining to all of this.
While the Johannesburg Stock Exchange isn't a proxy for what happens in the South African economy, it's a good sign that there's some confidence returning. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Kenya and Tanzania have agreed to further talks to end frosty trade ties that have defined bilateral relations in recent years. Trade ministers from both nations are expected to meet to discuss the easing of non-tariff barriers that, of course, have hindered trade between the two East African community partners. Now, trade value between Kenya and Tanzania dropped to $542.5 million in 2020, and that's compared to $565 million in 2012. The East African Business Council has identified barriers to trade as the reason behind declining regional trade. The value of intra-trade has remained below 20% of all trade effected through the bloc.
Our private sector should by now be looking beyond our borders to seize opportunities accorded by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which came into effect on the 1st of January this year, and the older but still important East African Community and EU Economic Partnership Agreement. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area trading arrangement offers numerous opportunities for the business community and great potential to enhance inter-Africa trade to levels that we have never experienced before.
The private sector is key to driving growth that will deliver these jobs, transform labor markets, open up opportunities, and unleash entrepreneurial spirit. These aspects can only be realized if businesses are operating in a conducive environment. And it is the role of our two governments to create this environment to facilitate growth of the private sector through good legislations, transparent and predictable taxation systems, efficient court systems which can expedite business cases, and existence of a good investment climate.
And heading to Ghana now, the country's tech space is set to see a boost as Twitter moves to set up its first Africa office in the country. The social media company joins Facebook and other tech companies that have already set up shop in Africa. Now, technology enthusiasts say the move could help Ghana establish a hub for tech startups. Here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reporting from Accra.
Kwabena Nkrumah has been connecting with people, especially technology savvies, on the social media app Twitter for more than a decade. He is among several Ghanaians excited about the company's decision to set up its first Africa office in Ghana. He believes it will drive a change in the technology space in the country.
Our skills are intangible, so it's very difficult for business to say, hey, a developer deserves this amount of credit or this amount of remuneration, because clearly they don't know how much it's worth. So for a company like this to come, it's going to raise the value of our developers, of our techies, and then thereby causing a shift.
Twitter says it settled on Ghana because of its support for free speech and democracy. It plans to employ 11 Ghanaians for positions including engineering, marketing, and communications specialists. But the choice of Ghana as Twitter's Africa headquarters hasn't been without controversy. Twitter fans in Nigeria see it as a snub to the continent's largest economy, which is also experiencing growth in its tech space since Facebook set up its first community hub in Africa in Nigeria in 2018. They wondered why their country was not selected because it has more than 36 million Twitter subscribers, which exceeds the entire population of Ghana. Analysts say Ghana had the upper hand because it's easier to do business in the country than Nigeria. In 2019, Ghana surpassed Nigeria in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index, ranking 13 places higher. Nkrumah says the presence of Twitter in Ghana could unearth many brilliant minds in the technology space.
It may draw the attention to some local developers' products that is good, but nobody is seeing. Maybe someone has created something that Twitter could put into Twitter and it could be very, very famous, but nobody's seen. But Twitter being here, that person could be seen, you know, and then that person's product grows, that person starts to make millions, that person creates the next big company, starts recruiting people, and then growing the Silicon Valley of Ghana, which we've been praying for years and years and years.
Twitter says it will be working remotely as it works towards opening a physical office in the country. In the meantime, Kwabena Nkrumah hopes this opportunity will help to transfer skills to many developers in Ghana and the entire African continent. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. Global insurer Allianz has acquired a 66% stake in Kenya's Jubilee General Insurance to become the majority shareholder. The purchase, worth $100.9 million, follows the execution of an agreement signed on September 29th. The Nairobi Securities Exchange listed insurer agreed to sell stakes in its general insurance subsidiaries in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, and Mauritius. Meanwhile, housing development financier Shelter Afrique hosts its 40th annual general meeting in Yaoundé, Cameroon next month. The organization has 44 member nations and plans to use the event to unveil its strategy for the next 40 years. Now, the company provides financing through debt, quasi-equity, and equity to both public and private institutions for housing and urban infrastructure projects in its member states. And Danish shipping company Maersk has raised its outlook for full year underlying earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization to an estimated $15 billion. This comes amid a surge in demand for shipping containers from China. Now, the company's CEO, Søren Skou, adds that strong demand led to bottlenecks as well as lack of capacity and equipment, which helped to drive up freight rates to record high levels. And Facebook's oversight board says it was justified in suspending former U.S. President Donald Trump's accounts, but it will reassess its decision to ban him indefinitely. This comes after the social media giant blocked Trump's access to his Facebook and Instagram accounts over concerns of further violent unrest following the storming of the U.S. Capitol by his supporters. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Nigerians' interest in cryptocurrencies defies the central bank's restrictions, and Tunisia seeks $4 billion from the International Monetary Fund.
Its effects are surreal, but its existence is undeniable. Mother Nature is fighting back against a species that is destroying it.
We're here to raise our voices. We know that climate change has already started and it's killing us.
It hurts. Amid the tears and the grief, however, there is hope for resolution.
We need to live in harmony with nature.
We focus on the deeds, the deals, and the people working to make a difference. This is Surviving Climate Change, only on CGTN. Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sudan.
Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Now, Nigeria is amongst the top nations in the world that have recorded the most interest in Bitcoin in the past year. That's despite restrictions placed on trade of the cryptocurrency by the financial regulator, the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, the Apex Bank in February restricted commercial banks from dealing in cryptocurrencies and ordered them to shut down accounts of crypto operators. But the interest of Nigerians in the digital currency just won't slow down. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
If you were looking for one typical example of how interest in the cryptocurrency is rapidly growing in Nigeria, then here is it. It's a class on everything about cryptocurrency in the Nigerian capital Abuja. It's run by this young man who describes himself as a cryptocurrency trader and investor. He says interest in his class has doubled since the Central Bank of Nigeria slammed restrictions on the trade in cryptocurrency in the country.
Now, it has actually given the crypto space more information. More people are getting to know about the cryptos after the announcement from federal government and central bank. Now, people are craving to know more about this. Do you understand? People are craving to know more about cryptocurrencies.
More young Nigerians are not just craving for more information on cryptocurrency. They're increasingly trading in it, ignoring warnings from the authorities on the risk involved. Last year alone, more than $400 million worth of the digital currency was traded in Nigeria.
The center of attraction on cryptocurrency is about the money. It helps people to make money. If you had bought Bitcoin by this time last year during the pandemic, at $5,000, I mean, today, you'll be sitting at $58,000.
It's not just the huge returns that is driving the interest in cryptocurrencies in Nigeria. A growing number of businesses are using them for ease of transactions involving forex and to avoid the impact of the devaluation of the naira.
With cryptocurrency, there is no limitation. You can send as huge as $100,000 to someone who is across border, and the person will receive the money. But in our banking system, you can't do that. The maximum you can send per day, I think, is $10,000. You see? So these are the things that is driving me particularly, and all the people that I educate about cryptocurrency.
Our importers, since they cannot get dollar from the CBN to fund their imports, so they turned into crypto as a means of exchange for buying their goods from their maybe merchants or producers offshore.
Back in his class, Polycarp is always upfront with his students about the risk involved in the cryptocurrency trade, especially its volatile nature.
If you don't know what to do, if you don't know how to trade, you'll be a victim. You pay dearly with your portfolio. The Bitcoin will dump on you. Do you understand? Dumping means it will crash. The dollar value of your coin will crash.
The cryptocurrency trade is more like a game of high stakes. But for Polycarp students here, it's a game they are determined to take part in. And of course, win. DJ Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, Tunisia is seeking financing of $4 billion from the International Monetary Fund in talks this week. Authorities in the North African nation want the money to aid in recovering from an economic crisis, which of course was aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. From Tunis, here's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
A high-level Tunisian delegation is visiting the International Monetary Fund, IMF, in Washington this week to commence talks that are crucial for the country's economic stability. Prime Minister Hisham Meshishi said that no agreements will be reached during this visit yet, but it will mark the beginning of talks with the IMF to secure the much-needed funding.
The main reason for this visit is both economic and social. A high-level delegation is in Washington, led by the Minister of Finance, the central bank governor, as well as social partners from the Business Leaders Union and senior economists. This is the first stage of meetings with the IMF.
The Tunisian delegation will present a detailed economic and financial reform program and ways to implement it in the short and long terms.
This visit is very important to restore confidence between Tunisia and this financial institution. We're presenting our structural reform plan, which is the pillar of our economic program. We'll soon start implementing the plan. The situation is very dangerous. The loan is very much needed. The reform plan will help us manage the crisis.
Former Finance Minister and senior economist Nizar Yaish noted that Tunisia's reforms should resolve the problem of public finances and debt. Yaish described as a top priority the restructuring of state subsidies, public companies and the high public wage bill.
The economic crisis in Tunisia is unprecedented based on many indicators. The high indebtedness, the huge sum the state needs to finance the 2021 extra budget, billions must be provided as soon as possible. The impact of fuel price hike and additional state expenses puts a lot of pressure and endangers the state budget. Reforming the economy is an urgent request.
The Tunisian government will negotiate with the IMF on the basis of reform projects. These reforms are also targeting a fair taxation and a wider tax base, the digitization of the vast majority of services, and governance of state spending. Tunisian finance minister has pledged a new and better strategy of negotiation with the IMF. The new strategy is based on a program of deep reforms to be implemented to revive the national economy. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And heading to Egypt, the country's economy lost $23.6 billion in 2020 due to the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, authorities there say the most affected sectors include civil aviation, tourism, and construction. From Cairo, Yasser Hakim examines the measures the government has taken to handle the economic shocks from the pandemic fallout.
Like in most countries around the world, the COVID-19 outbreak has taken its toll on Egypt's state budget. The government in the North African state had to roll out over $8 billion in emergency funds, as well as develop the healthcare services to deal with the high number of coronavirus cases throughout 2020. While expenditure mushroomed, foreign direct investments dropped significantly, as well as other sources of hard currency, which also plummeted.
The tourism, aviation and construction sectors were negatively affected by the pandemic.
The government provided support to these sectors. A 6.5 billion stimulus package was pumped into the economy. 1/5 of it was allocated to the tourism and aviation industry, and another portion to the health sector. The transportation sector also received a considerable amount to upgrade services and infrastructure. These initiatives have helped, but there were still huge losses, and it's obvious it forced the state budget review.
A strong IMF-backed economic reform program that started in 2016 had softened the effects of the $24 billion budget loss. It has helped Egypt to be one of a few countries to post positive growth rates amidst the pandemic. According to Egyptian Minister of Finance Mohammed Maid, the government is eyeing an ambitious 5 to 6% growth rates in the next couple of years, up from the current 2.8%.
Supporting the IT and telecom sector financially has helped it flourish and become an important element in the targeted economic growth rate. The resumption of construction of national mega projects by the state after the lockdown are keeping the economy operating and growth levels up. Another important element is the support to the construction industry because the state interference has avoided a bubble burst in the market as real estate developers and the system were chaotic. We'll also see growing foreign direct investments in energy. Latest discoveries in natural gas is enabling it to attract the most investments.
The government also hopes the crucial but hard-hit tourism industry can recover by the second half of the year, as it would be a major boost to the targeted growth rates and foreign reserves. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break now, still to come. The connection between South Africa's devastating drought of 2015 and climate change. And the former founder and CEO of fraudulent blood testing company Theranos appears in a U.S. federal court. It's an interesting story.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
And just about 1:30, here's a recap of other headlines. World Trade Organization members have been discussing a proposal to waive patent rights on COVID-19 vaccines, and that's amid growing pressure on rich nations to relax them. This as a way to help poorer nations fight the pandemic. Now, the proposal to ease up on patent protections for vaccines was submitted by South Africa and India in October and is backed by about 60 countries. And militants have killed 35 people in 2 attacks in Nigeria's Borno state. 5 soldiers are amongst the dead. The fighters belonging to Islamic State West Africa Province, or ISWAP, arrived in trucks fitted with machine guns, attacking Ajiri town and a military base. The latest incident puts pressure on President Muhammadu Buhari over his handling of the growing security crisis in the country. And a journalist who disappeared last month in Mali's northern city of Gao has appeared in a video appealing for authorities to help free him. The 21-second video shared on social media is yet to be verified by authorities. Olivier Dubois is the first French national to be taken hostage by jihadist militants in Mali, and that's after aid worker Sophie Petronin was freed in October last year. And finally, in Uganda, the government's AIDS Commission is trying to understand why there was a drop in HIV infections in 2020. Now, globally, there were concerns that disruptions to HIV treatment during the pandemic will lead to increased infection rates, according to the UN AIDS program. And that's a recap of other headlines this hour. Now, back in 2015, South Africa recorded its lowest annual rainfall since 1904. It resulted in a year-long drought in the Western Cape that caused the region's dams to reach critically low levels, prompting the government to declare a national disaster. Well, CGTN's Julie Shire investigates whether climate change triggered these major changes.
South Africa's Western Cape drought had the province and the city of Cape Town on its knees. The 4-year-long drought resulted in widespread water shortages, significant drop in agriculture production, and tens of thousands of job losses. I set out to ask scientists, experts, and farmers if the effects of climate change were to blame.
This was South Africa's worst drought since the turn of the 20th century. I mean, since 1900, we never had a drought of that magnitude. It was one of the most devastating in the country. It affected not only agricultural sector, not only water availability, but it affected the entire economy. That's how devastating this drought was.
To get 3 drought years in a row is a very difficult situation, and no one can predict that, no one can expect that. This time, after 1 drought, we thought, well, if it rains next winter, we'll be fine. After the 2nd drought, we thought, well, we've got restrictions going. If it rains the next winter, we'll be fine. And then it didn't rain. We detected at least a degree of warming in the last 100 years. And this is due to human-induced climate change, which is emissions, carbon dioxide and other emissions into the atmosphere. And this is manifest mostly in increasing temperatures and in changing rainfall.
Developing South Africa's capacity to predict and adapt to the global climate crisis is critical, and it's all being monitored here.
Our projections indicate that we are expecting a more drier South Africa, and that tells you that we can't just be depending on rain-fed rainfall. We need to be thinking about other means how we can diversify. So the model that we are developing right now, we want to make it more suitable for the South African conditions. We know at the moment that the current model we are using struggles with capturing the intensity of extreme rainfall events. And when we develop the model ourselves, we will be able to make improvements where we find that there is something that is missing.
So there are signs that the South African region is already being impacted by climate change. If we think in terms of what we have experienced over the past few years, the Cape Town drought, 2015 to 2017 period, that was characterized by a few years in a row with below normal rainfall. A study did show that climate change contributed to that lack in rainfall. That study was performed by some of our colleagues at the University of Cape Town.
The climate change projections for the Western Cape are not good. They are saying that we're going to get warmer and we're most likely going to get less rain. Those are the projections, and we've seen the trends showing that. And whether these more frequent droughts are a sign of that, we don't know for sure. But in the last 20 years, we've had more years below average rainfall than above average rainfall. So that indicates that Cape Town needs to be doubly aware.
The worst droughts in over a century wreaked havoc in this region. Now dams are full and the rains have come, but it can happen again. Cape Town's water system is almost entirely dependent on rainfall, making it highly vulnerable to climate variability and change.
Water is life. Without water, you don't have life. The 2015 to 2018 period was devastating for so many people and so many farms because everybody woke up very late. Climate change is a massive problem in our lives, and for me personally, it's a very, very big part of who I am as an individual and how we run our farms and how we operate. So it's consciously, it's in my mindset every single day. Cape Town woke up too late. Definitely now, there's a much more consciousness that when the next drought comes, we will be a lot more prepared. And the crazy thing is with global warming, it's happening so quickly. Temperatures are lower than they've ever been. It's happening so quickly. So it's not about the next generation, it's about our generation. It's about the next 5 to 10 years. What's that going to look like? And if we don't do something about it, this could be a very scary place to live.
We had a hunch it was coming, but then there's the farmer always hope it's going to rain next season, it's going to rain next season. And yeah, it hit us. We need water for everything. I mean, water gives you tonnages, it gives you size, it gives you crop. And at the end of the day, it's all about income and survival. The big dams that used to supply us, they cut us by about, 70%. But we had proper technology. We've got drip irrigation around the farm, connected to a computer. Farmers that didn't have that technology definitely felt it. Some people had no water. I think climate change got a lot to do with it, and I think there was a bit of ignorance as well. I think especially the city of Cape Town, they saw this coming a long time ago. No dams have been built in quite a while. I think they could have started a long time ago just educating people. Water restrictions maybe a year or two earlier, so the dams could be fuller for a longer time.
2015, start of the drought. 2016, was probably the worst harvest we had in many years. Went all the way through to 2018. Only 19 and 20 that we're sort of starting to recover. We had tremendous issues with quality during drought because the grapes just don't have the flavor profiles they should be getting. Having an effect on what are we going to be planting going forward. If that's the sort of weather pattern that we're going to see going forward, we need to plant grapes that can be more resistant to drought and warming climate change.
Climate change is a long-term thing, you know. It's not we can't see a shift within 5 years or 10 years, but I can see in 25 years, I can definitely see a shift. Even if you go up country where I grew up, there are periods where people, 7 years no rain. It's changed, and we really need to adapt in our approach in the agricultural area to make sure we are geared for the future. You know.
It's a very simple equation. People need water to live, to cook, to eat, to drink, but they also need water for recreation. People need water for all sorts of reasons, and one can't deprive them of that water. But it is very important that we understand and we monitor the water usage in times when we do have water.
Water is a source of life. It anchors most of the economy from agriculture. So when you run out of water, you are coming very close to having an environment that is uninhabitable, that people won't live in that environment. Either their lives end or they move to an area where there is water.
Climate change is really just one of our problems. Another problem is that we don't do sustainable and regenerative agriculture. If you do farm sustainably, you are more resilient against climate change.
I'm Farmer Angus. I practice regenerative agriculture. And this is one of the things that we do on the farm. These are called eggmobiles. The hens, they overnight in the eggmobiles. They lay their eggs in the eggmobiles. And then we move these eggmobiles every single day of the year to fresh pasture.
Angus believes that the secret in fighting climate change lies in regenerative agriculture.
Just on our little farm, we have just been paid for sequestering, in other words, taking CO2 out of the atmosphere into the soil. 7,100 tons is what we sequestered over the last 3 years. And that's on a tiny scale in 3 drought years with an understocked farm. Now, just to place 7,000 tons of CO2 in context, an aeroplane from Cape Town to London and back emits 2 tons. Okay, so if we can do it on our tiny little scale, there's no limit to what the big people could do if they wanted to.
We take the soil for granted, we take the soil moisture for granted, we use too many chemicals, and that kind of farming is just destroying our resource. So someone like Farmer Angus, who's looking at the soil and trying to farm properly, does 2 things. First of all, he makes himself sustainable and produces a product that he can sell for a higher price.
My name is Mawitu, my name is Kamle. I'm doing this free-range farming. The drought was very bad in Western Cape. There was no water. On the farm, it affected us a lot. We tried so many things to survive. Climate change is affecting the weather as well. It is worrying us a lot. If we don't have water as farmers, I don't see us surviving or doing farming. Because without water, there's nothing of which we can do. We have to have water to do farming.
The drought in the Western Cape is a man-made drought. And there are 3 factors that contribute to it. And the tragedy for me is that none of the politicians are even acknowledging the problem and therefore will not solve it. And the 3 problems are urbanization. The second one is alien vegetation or invasive species. And then the third thing is, of course, agriculture. Farmers aren't farming regeneratively. Very few of them are building carbon in their soil. In fact, almost none of them are. And whereas if they were farming regeneratively and they were building carbon in the soil, the more carbon, the more water holding capacity there is. So there's a way out of this drought. Despite all the global problems we have, the solutions are right here.
7.8 billion people in the world. You know, it starts with one individual. You know, if one person makes that difference and is conscious about the amount of water that they use, about the amount of energy that they use, about their carbon footprint, I mean, that will change the world. How do you do it? It's through education, and it's through bringing communities into these types of environments and educating the importance of water.
But we can take the positives out of it as a wake-up call, as a reminder that this resource is not limitless. This resource can run out. You can be without water for a long period, and therefore consciously we need to start thinking, okay, let's preserve this resource.
Because climate change is a long-term thing and the changes are insidious and they happen very slowly, people don't take it seriously. Every one of us has a responsibility to make a difference in our own lives by teaching our children, by passing on the message. I think children are the future, and if the children see us doing something and we talk about it, they will grow up having heard that, and they will grow up doing things differently. The hope is that if everyone plays their part, we can get through this, we can get over this.
We all feel peaceful and happy when we are in a place like this. But without water, it can't exist. If we continue business as usual and not listen to the science and ignore regenerative agriculture practices, the long-term prognosis for our survival on this planet will be very poor. The Western Cape drought was a loud wake-up call to South Africans. Let it be a lesson to the world. If we take care of nature, it will take care of us. And the solution to reversing climate change might just be under our feet.
Well, let's move on now. Former founder and CEO of Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, appeared in a U.S. federal court in San Jose, California on Tuesday. Now, she is charged with fraud in the spectacular rise and fall of the U.S. blood testing company. Holmes and former Theranos president Ramesh Sunny Balwani have also been charged with falsely claiming Theranos could revolutionize medical lab testing with technology that could enable a wide array of tests with a few drops of blood. Now, Holmes was indicted in 2018. Her federal trial in California was originally scheduled for July 28, 2020, but was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Holmes and Balwani have pled not guilty to the charges. On that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Robusta coffee futures hit a two-year high, with recent reports from coffee majors like Starbucks indicating that demand is improving. Meanwhile, cocoa also rose amid upbeat sentiment in wider financial markets. It has, of course, been pressured by a widely forecast global surplus for the current 2020-2021 season. Meanwhile, oil extended a rally following a sharp drop in U.S. stockpiles and expectations of a summer surge in fuel demand. Gold prices ticked up today. They were lifted by a retreat in the dollar. Let's take a short break now. Still to come. Ethiopia's latest graduates raring to drive the Ethiopia-Djibouti railway trains.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, it's been just days since philanthropist billionaire Bill Gates and his wife Melinda announced their divorce, and beneficiaries of the Gates Foundation are already concerned over future funding. Now, a school in South Africa has expressed fear that the decision could impact children and schools in Africa that receive support from the foundation. Inkani Primary School, situated in an informal settlement in the Kailisha township, has over 1,000 children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. It started to receive funds from the Gates Foundation 2 years ago to kickstart its operation and support the new school's growing needs.
We didn't expect the couple of that age can break up. I mean, we don't know the details yet, but we feel it pains also because it might affect us, particularly in Africa, where the Gates family was assisting in terms of making sure that the education is taken care of through that foundation. So even though they are going to be separated, the issue of the foundation is not going to be affected. We know a lot of people will say those things, but once the divorce come through, definitely there will be casualties or victims in the process. And those victims would be the children of Africa, where the Gates family committed to do something in terms of their schools like ours.
Well, let's shift our focus to Ghana now. Many people who lost their jobs due to the coronavirus pandemic in the country are struggling to find jobs. Calls are now mounting for the government to support businesses financially so that they can create those jobs. Well, CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports on the situation from Accra.
Ernest Azu has been out of a job for the past year. He was laid off as a janitor in one of the hotels in Accra when the outbreak of the coronavirus in Ghana led to a lockdown and forced businesses to shut down.
The management told us they could no longer pay our salaries because tourists had cancelled their bookings due to the pandemic. We were told not to come back to work. They said they could call us when the situation improves.
Data from Ghana's Statistical Service shows that more than 40,000 people were laid off during the lockdown last year, while nearly 800,000 workers, 25% of the total workforce, had their wages slashed. Labor analysts are concerned that many people have yet to get back their jobs, even as lockdown restrictions have been lifted.
The government will have to find a way of stimulating the economy and helping employers to regain their feet.
Last year, the government set up a coronavirus alleviation program to protect jobs, livelihoods, and support small businesses. It provided loans up to $100 million to small and medium-scale enterprises. Still, analysts say more needs to be done.
Banks should be ready to take the risk involved. Then the next stage will be for the workers to be galvanized through training and development of skills to be able to perform.
Ghana's economy is trying to recover from the shocks caused by the pandemic, with lockdown restrictions lifted. Ratings agency Fitch has estimated the country's economy to jump from $62.8 billion to $70 billion by the end of the year, making it the 8th biggest economy in Africa. Despite the positive economic outlook, the tourism and hospitality industry in Ghana is still struggling to bounce back, as some parts of the world continue to record a surge in COVID-19 infections. Tourist inflows to Ghana have yet to pick up. Azu says he has applied for jobs in other hotels, but has not been successful. With Ghana's rollout of COVID-19 vaccines, he hopes things begin to improve, so he finds a productive way to use his time. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Meanwhile, many Sudanese are cutting down on groceries for Ramadan feasts this year. That's as acute inflation blunts the impact of a donor-funded scheme to pay most citizens a basic monthly income. Take a look.
Magda Ahmed takes care of orphaned children. Soaring prices in Sudan have left her running up tabs at local stores and cutting back on evening feasts during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
I found meat costing $3.10. Water, electricity and school fees are expensive, and every time I go to the market, I find that prices have increased. All the while, I still haven't received the money from the family support program. We hope that they will be here by now, especially during these days of Ramadan.
She is one of millions struggling through an economic crisis that has deepened as Sudan tries to emerge from decades of isolation and conflict. Inflation has risen to more than 340%. There are shortages of everything, from power to medicines. To ease the pain of reforms, the government is introducing a donor-funded scheme. The basic income scheme is known as Thamarat, which means fruits, and is also called the Sudan Family Support Program. It's meant to provide a temporary $5 basic monthly income to 80% of its population of 43 million.
I signed up for the family support program for my family of 6. I received $29.50. This is $4.80 for each individual, and to be honest, this sum of money has been helpful during Ramadan. Despite that living conditions are difficult and that there is a lot of pressure, but still, it has had an impact.
Sudan has received $820 million from the World Bank and donor countries for the program's first 2 phases. This is meant to cover 24 million people in 12 states for 6 months. However, the program is not yet funded to reach the remainder of the targeted 32.5 million.
I signed up for the family support program and they told me that the money is on its way, but until now I haven't received it. I have orphaned children to look after, but still have not received anything. They said it would take a week for it to clear, but it's been 2 months now and we got nothing.
Failure to receive their sums of money came as a result of citizens giving an incomplete account number or giving an account number that doesn't belong to the same person, or phone number in which the transfer is supposed to take place, or the number is not registered in their name, and we are fixing this problem partly with the banks and partly with the beneficiaries themselves.
The program came about as the government pursues an aggressive economic reform program monitored by the International Monetary Fund. This is in a bid to win relief on at least $50 billion in debt and access funding from international lenders. The ongoing reforms have included a sharp currency devaluation in February and fuel subsidy cuts over the second half of last year. The government hopes to use the program to facilitate a permanent social safety net for the poorest million families. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Meanwhile, 34 Ethiopians graduated Tuesday as train drivers for the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway. The drivers were part of a Chinese government-sponsored program which was aimed at creating skilled manpower. Here's Chao Mgono with their story.
It's been 3.5 years since the Ethiopia-Djibouti railway project was renovated and began operations. The railway stretches for 752 kilometers and links Addis Ababa in Ethiopia with the Red Sea port of Djibouti. It provides both passenger and freight services and has contributed to industrialization and growth of the Ethiopian economy. A batch of Ethiopian train drivers was certified after training for 2.5 years, with around 8 months spent in China.
Dear graduates, I congratulate you for accomplishing your training successfully. I call upon all of you to use and share the knowledge and skills that you have acquired during your training. I also urge you to give back your knowledge and capacity to your dear country from the bottom of your heart, thereby bringing significant change in the sector. Congratulations again.
The 8 months training that we have received in China and here were very interesting and crucial. We already achieved a lot. We got an important knowledge and experiences. It was actually current training time. Every single one of these graduates worked hard, sacrificed their times and energies to get here. I believe the purpose of our training has been completely accomplished very well. Every little encounters and the experience gained in China has been enriching us and will remain within our memories.
The training program is part of plans for Ethiopia to fully operate the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway. The project is currently operated by China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation Limited and China Railway Group Limited.
Yes, it is true. This railway was built by Chinese contractors and operated by Chinese contractors. But, and after all, my dear Ethiopian friends, you are the owner and the beneficiary of this Ethiopia. The ownership of this railway belongs to Ethiopia. And someday, this railway will and should be operated by Ethiopian yourselves. So, knowledge transfer matters, and capacity building is critical.
Chamhono, CGTN.
Well, before we go, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies today. Most emerging market currencies easing against the dollar. South Africa's rand holding steady after private sector activity expanded at its strongest rate in 9 years in April. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.